प्रथमे न अर्जितः विद्या, द्वितीये न अर्जितः धनम, तृतीये न अर्जितः पुण्यम, chaturthe kim karishyasi. That means, what will you do in the fourth part of your life when you probably retire, when you are really going to that Vanaprastha ashram? What will you do then if in the first part of your life you haven't gained knowledge? The second part of your life you haven't got the money. The third part of your life you haven't got the merit or the character or the those things. If you don't have that, what will you do in your fourth life? And therefore, I would believe that all of us, for that matter, may be in the second or the third one, not necessarily the fourth, and therefore we have a long way to go. I would address my this whole thing for in about 4 chapters. One is what my journey. The second one is what I believe are the principles which would take or make one successful in life. And the third one would be the situation post-COVID and at this point in time. And then, of course, the fourth is leaving the question answer session open for you. To start with my life and journey of 42 years, I'll start from with 42 years, though I'm older. When I say 42, I'll start where I finished my 10th standard, because that's where the life changing things have had happened. I actually belong to a very God-loving Andhra in South Indian family, raised up with very clear doctrines in life, and that is the values in life matter more than the wealth. The principles matter more than the possessions. This is what I have been always been taught, and that's what I have believed in. We actually came to Ahmedabad in 1971 when I was in the 4th standard. Since then, I've been here. I studied in the St. Xavier's School, Loyola, and passed out the 10th in 78. Since childhood, I've actually been very ambitious. And for me, the first rank only mattered. The second rank just won't do. To this ranking business, and why probably this came into my mind would have been because in my lower KG, I got second rank. And I said, why did I get first? And I think probably that is the time when I started to think about it. And fortunately, I've been able to live up to all those aspirations of mine. After 10th, I wanted to go to the 10th to the science stream, and I had about 93%. I had everything which I could get into the science stream. On top of that, I wanted to study in the Satyasai College, Whitefield, Bangalore, staying in the hostel there. And therefore, after 10th, I went to Bangalore. But as destiny would have it, the college management sat down together and they were looking for some good students to go into the commerce. So they told me that they don't have any, there is no school seats in the science stream. And therefore, if you wanted to study in that college, I would have to go into the commerce. Now, that was a life and career turning, taking a complete 180-degree turn. I hated commerce. I never wanted to go for that. But then I was given the whole of 1 minute to decide whether I can change from science to commerce or I would want to go back. My father, who's a double graduate in commerce, as well as he's a cost accountant himself, inspired me to say that, okay, encouraged me. He said, I did only cost accounting. You can also always do chartered accountancy and cost accountancy. So why did you take it up? I took that up. And that was my first lesson in life, that you may not always get what you like, but you have to start liking what you have and what you have to do. And that's where I started. That college and the teachings there, the entire course, the curriculum, the system, the hostel, and Sri Sathya Sai Baba's teachings has actually made me who I am today. If it was not for that college, that was not for that course which I've taken, I don't think I would be here where I am today. I took it up sincerely. So I finished my BCom 11th, 12th, as well as BCom from there. And I passed out of the college with the first rank and the gold medal in commerce, having topped the university. And as decided at that point in time, as soon as I came back to Ahmedabad in 1983 after I passed out, and took up the CA and ICAA, that is cost accounting and chartered accountancy together. And in a matter of 3 years from then, 1986, I completed both of them with merit and rank in the all India rank. I didn't want to stop at that point in time, and I thought that why not look at the other courses also. So with a gap of about, I actually joined Ingersoll Rand. I started working, but then I thought, well, let's try out the other courses. So therefore, I joined for the company secretary course as well as the chartered financial analyst course together once again. And in a matter of 3 years from then, I passed out both, but for two subjects in CFA, with work pressure at that point that already had begun. I had joined Ashima, and therefore I left. I mean, I finished almost all the courses, but they gave me a degree in CFA also. My foundation of a solid finance growth actually laid down as far as my articleship days itself, because there I worked not like trading or an article. Actually, I worked like an employee, because a lot of things were to learn, especially the project financing and all that. It was cultivated further in Ingersoll Rand when I joined in 1987, where it was a systems-oriented company, and I also had to establish a lot of internal audit systems and all that. And therefore, that was where I actually cultivated professionalism. Then this whole thing grew in Group Ashima, where I spent about 18 years of my life, from 1989 to right up to 2007, where I did everything which was needed for the growth of a profession and for the company. That is, from budgets to accounts, to funding, to acquisitions, to joint ventures, to equity placement, and also managing businesses. Some of the most difficult aspects, most astounding growth happened during this time, and that gave me an all-round experience. This whole thing was nurtured further when ambition took me to Singapore, and to work for a Singaporean company as a CFO, Chief Financial Officer. That was an infrastructure Singaporean company doing all the big infrastructure in and around Singapore and in China. It was struggling at that point in time, but then by the time I got out of that in 2009, that is about 2.5 years, the order book position rose from about 3 million, 3 months rather, to about 3 years of order book position. It was an EPC infrastructure company. And I left them with a surplus of about 250 million paying dividends. And this, I think, was not just helpful for them, but that entire experience gave me an international exposure and dollar income. Ahmedabad has always been a house for me. As I told you, I went in 71 and I went out in 78 to Bangalore for 5 years, but then I came back. And then when I went back to Singapore, house was always Ahmedabad. And this Adanis knew very well. And therefore, they called me while I was in Singapore and then brought me back to Ahmedabad into their ports and logistics business in 2009. Little did I know at that point in time that this would be leading to the peak of my career. 9 years of almost 24/7 work gave me an opportunity to lead the ports and the logistics business from just one port in 2009 to 10 ports when I left in 2018. The revenues grew from about 1,100 crores to 11,000 crores. The market cap went from 14,000 crores to 94,000 crores. Actually, the Adani Ports price went up to the highest ever, is at 452 at that point in time. I was also fortunate to lead the biggest in the acquisition overseas in the infrastructure space. And that was acquiring the Australian port of Abbott Point. It was a $2 billion acquisition, which I led and got the entire international finance and also the banking, Australian banks as well as the international banks for it. After that, I have also had 2-3 other acquisitions in India, ranging from 500 million to $1 billion from Tata and from the L&Ts. I had that too. We were the imports. We were the only company which got the international investment grade rating at the first attempt. Even Reliance, which went for the first time in the international rating, didn't get a BBB- that is investment grade. And we were the one to get it for the first attempt. And after that, we raised about $2 billion in the international bonds, that is, dollar bonds from all over the universe. This, as well as equity placements, we did equity placements in Adani Ports. We did QIPs ranging from 500 to $1 billion in other group entities of Adani, where I was involved. So all this was going on extremely well. We did a lot of joint venture, international joint ventures. The entire value of what I did in that particular period would have been easily 40 to 50,000 crores. The list is long, of course, what we have achieved in the last 9 years or even before that. The list is long, but obviously that cannot be the topic for the day, and therefore I leave it at this. Only thing I can say that when everything was going well, a moment of reckoning came for me, and that was in 2017. That was I had actually when I was about 38 to 40 years, I had planned for myself that when I'm 55, I wouldn't want to work anymore. That is, I would not want to do a job anymore. And then when I got to my 55th birthday in 2017, April 12th, I thought I should implement that. And I went to the management while I was at the peak of the achievements. Frankly, that was the time when the share price also had gone up. And I put in my paper. This shocked all my colleagues, the management, friends. I remember Divya and everybody writing to me as to what the hell I was doing. And of course, the financial circles, the market circles, everybody was shocked as to what is it that, why have you left for that? But I believe that you need to challenge yourself all the time. And therefore, 55 was not a very, big age, neither a too small age to start another journey. And that journey was what I started as an advisor. And that was the second innings, as I can say. It was like setting up everything fresh, everything new, like some of you would have done as a startup. But I'm glad to say again that I am handling some good assignments and helping the larger interests of larger corporates. Within a year of leaving that job, I got one of the best assignments, and that was what my twin sons came up with an idea. Chaitanya, who's one of the active members of BNI Magnus chapter, all of you know, he and his twin brother, who are actually National Law School lawyers, who have spent their entire 26 years of life in Ahmedabad, chose to resign from their well-placed capital markets 3 years experience with City Merchant Mangaldas to start their own venture called Roasty. This is a unique, one of its kind, filter coffee and Indian masala tea dispensing machine, as well as cafe. I'm the angel investor at this time and a mentor and an advisor. The concept, the potential of this is really very huge. And it could be the next big brand like CCD or even better in the beverage space. I'm sure my time would be spent very well in that. I always actually wanted to create something, create jobs, and my sons are giving me the opportunity to do so. I think this whole thing rhymes in my family because my wife, who works, she's a banker. She worked for 26 years, and one fine morning she resigned and said, "I don't want to do a job anymore. I want to dedicate my rest of the time to social service," which is what she's doing. I quit the job after 32 years of peak, saying that enough of this, I want to do something different. And it took only 3 years for my sons to decide the same thing, saying that, okay, fine, I want to create a business. I think this is what the destiny is. It sure has its ways, and therefore I always believe, jab jab jo jo hona hai, tab tab so hota hai. That's actually in short, the brief, the entire thing where it came at this point in time. In the entire journey, I always have believed that there are certain principles and philosophy. And Arjun, I can say that even whether it is a startup, whether it's a large corporate, whether it is an individual, whether it is an employee, whether it is he's an entrepreneur, these things will definitely help. I'm sure everybody. It has helped me, and I'm certain it will help everyone. And these are the principles. I call them as actually there were 10 commandments. I've set aside for 15 commandments. And the first apart from the commandments, if you really have to succeed, there's one thing in life, and that is, apart from all the qualifications that you have, you need one necessary ingredient, and that is God's grace. Believe me, whether you call it God, whether you call it a superior power, whatever you like to say, or you can call your elders' wishes or good wishes, whatever you can say, but you need that one good thing, one ingredient without which nobody can ever be successful. We all have two lives, let me say. And even what is two lives? Apart from the Brahmins who are, called Vijay, that is, they get the second birth after the Janu, like I am there, or let's say Divya. They're called having two lives. The second life starts then. But actually, all of us have got two lives. The second life starts when you believe that, oh, you only have one life. That's when actually you start working even harder. And you say, you only have one life, I have to make maximum achievement. I have followed a few principles, as I said. The first and foremost, and I have been brought up in an environment of piousness and culture, religion, as well as holy books, and most of us are Indians are, and that was following Gita's principle, and that is all of us know this, and that is karmanya varidikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phal hetu bhi ma te sangatse sarvani karmani. Now, this actually means that Falki Icha Matra Ko and all that, and most of the youngsters will say, come on, when we work, why could you, how can you not have an eye on the success and few Falki Icha na rakhe? But frankly, the whole meaning is not that. Once you start working and when you're only interested in the results and when you're only interested in what you're going to get out of it, frankly, you lose concentration. You don't even work concentrate on the job itself, and therefore you're not likely to succeed. So what it means is that you concentrate on the work, the results will automatically follow. You don't have to worry about the results. You do the job well. If you're true to yourself, to the job, 100% committed, body, soul, and mind to it, then you are bound to succeed. You always have to believe I believe rather, that you have to give that bit extra, little more. Don't define your boundaries so sharply, saying that this is my job, this is not my job. Don't really worry about that. Just don't define those boundaries so sharply. When you're open, when you are looking for doing anything and everything in life, even the smallest of the job, let's say in startups or anything, then opportunities do come along. You need to be the conscience keeper of your employer, or if you're your own employee, then you be your own conscience keeper. You have to be confident about that the stakeholders, whether it is the suppliers or your shareholders or any investors, you are the conscience keeper for them, and you need to ensure that you being the gatekeeper, nothing can go wrong. The fifth one is don't indulge in bickering, backbiting, gossip, wasting of time. Frankly, time waste is life waste and it never comes back. Punctuality and discipline is the sixth. Now, frankly speaking, that's where most of us Indians have a big problem. We are not punctual. We don't want to respect other people's time. And therefore, from beginning, I don't know how that this was something which I felt you need to be disciplined. You need to be absolutely punctual. So even in Adani, though I was at a very senior position, none of my other senior colleagues used to come before 10:30 in the morning. I would be there at 9:30, even before my own staff would be coming. And this kind of thing, I think it's not something that you teach. It just comes in within you. And if you do believe in that, I'm certain that will help you in all aspects of life. Seven, you need to cultivate friends and be true to your friends. Now, friendship is something which is most, and I can see that the great bonhomie and the friendship which BNI has been cultivating, and the kind of the members have. I'm saying cultivate the true friendship. I was a very junior officer in Ingersoll Rand when I joined in 1987. I'm really happy to say that even today, the most senior-most officers, I think I've not even been in touch, but they remember, whether it's through Facebook or any other medium, we have been in touch and we are still friends. So I think that is something which you definitely need to cultivate. You have to adapt yourself. Even for a startup, you have to get molded as per the requirement of the situation and flow as per the organization needs or the needs of what the occasion demands. And that's what I think is the eighth one, which I will believe in. Because all of us know that positive attitude and never say die attitude, that is absolutely important. There is definitely a truth in saying that nothing is impossible and there is no problem in earth which does not have a solution. I'll tell you what happened. We are doing an IIP in Adani Port, and it was a hopeless situation because we were given only time till for about 20 minutes to do a IIP. Finance people would know if required, and that too it was not here. It was all across the globe. That means we have to do 144A also. That is US market. It requires not less than 2 to 3 months of preparation. We have been given only 22 days of preparation. We, with the team, achieved that. But within that, what happened was that there was also a board resolution and a signature required by the directors, subscribing to the offer document, and they have to sign to it. And one of our board directors, and because that was in the month of May, obviously a holiday season for many, he was on a cruise ship. And it was impossible to get his signature. Now, that was something we should have to give up. But we didn't have a choice at that point in time. We said we have to do it. So somehow, through their offices, we found out the satellite phone, the communication channels for the cruise ship, located the director, gave them the papers on fax and other communication systems, got a signature, and filed it with the ROC. So I'm saying that if you want a solution, there's nothing which you can actually say that there is a problem. The ninth, or the 10th rather, always keep the organization's, the group's interest uppermost. Be worthy of whatever brand that you're working for or trying to create. Keep the name up. Of course, the 11th is, and the most important, I would see, you need to be patient. And why I'm saying that most important is that many of the people right at this point in time, especially this generation, really want to achieve something which overnight. I'm saying be patient, keep your ears and eyes open. Always have a higher purpose in life. What you're doing today, you are going to do better. You have a much higher purpose in life is what we definitely need to believe. Again, I come back at this point in time, because of this, I have patience and you need to really grow your business. There is a Sanskrit sloka again, back again. And that is, Ati Trishna na kartavya, Trishnam naiva parityajet. That means don't show too much of greed. Don't yearn for too much. But at the same time, don't give up on the desire also. So Ati Trishnam na kartavya, Trishnam naiva parityajet. Shanai shanai cha bhoktavyam. Swayam vittam uparjitam. So you spend your money in moderation from time to time. Don't give up desire. Don't be too greedy, but accumulate wealth and spend that over moderation. And that's the kind of the thing which I think principles will help. That is a saving thing. What even I think we all know that we need to first invest and then spend what we have. Most of us spend and then invest what is balanced, less. So I think the first thing is invest, and then whatever is balanced is what you need to supposed to be spending. Very important. 12th is leave your ego behind. Be humble. There's nothing which you have achieved. I'm talking to myself at this point in time. Nothing that I have achieved can really make me feel egoistic about, frankly. So the moment you believe that, you stop there. Just look at Azim Premji, look at Ratan Tata's, and there are many, many such stories. All of us know about that. How is it that you are so humble? They have achieved such a lot in life. They do such a lot in life, but they're still very humble because it's actually not what that they have achieved. They have achieved that because they're humble, frankly speaking. So the way it grows is be humble, help ever, or rather help always, and hurt never. Now, do as much help as you can to people. Don't try to hurt them at this point in time. And that is actually developing a bit of spirituality. In organizations, in an individual, a bit of a spirituality. And when I say spirituality, it's not necessarily religion. I'm really talking about the living the good life. Unless you have that kind of a spirituality and you have emotions which along with you to work in life, I don't think you will be able to achieve. Follow the philosophy that work is worship, duty is God, and more importantly, what we have learned is hands in the society and heads in the forest. What does it mean? You're working in the society, but you're always having a mindset of that of a sage because you're looking at, being a balanced individual. So while you work in the society, your mind always should be thinking something different, something a bigger purpose in life. The last is be tolerant. Be mindful of others' viewpoint. Be kept mindful of others' needs. So if I don't think I can say that I have practiced all 15 of them to the fullest. As I said, nobody can be perfect. But if you can even do these points in time, these 15 things in moderation or wherever it's possible, I'm certain that success is there just around the corner. It can never be away from you. Because to conclude in that, this particular aspect, the beliefs become thoughts. So what you're believing is what translates to thoughts. Thoughts become your actions. So when you do that, you actually convert it. Your actions become your habit. Your habit becomes your character. And your character is what actually shapes your destiny. So if you believe and you have strong beliefs in life, you will be deciding your own destiny. And that's what it is. And when that's what we all, when we get up in the morning, most of us may be saying the Karagare Vasate Lakshmi, Karamadhya Saraswati, Karamule Govinda, Prabhate Kardarshanam, which is all what you have. The Lakshmi is not everywhere. It's in your hands, in the hard work. So if you can follow that, I'm certain you will be able to do a lot more for the society and for yourself. This all is what to end the first two things. One is what I have done in my life, whatever little or more, and what are the principles which I believe will help you to reach where you are. Now I'll come to the third page, third part of it, and that is the present one, and which I'm sure most of you are also very eagerly looking for. Who's bothered? Who's really interested in listening as to what others have done? All want to really know, frankly, what is it that is in store for himself. So I respect that. I would address that aspect of COVID again in four parts. What's the global scenario? What is the short-term issues which are affecting the industry and the opportunities therein again? What is the India growth and opportunity versus the world? And of course, the stock market scenario, which all of us Gujaratis are interested. Again, at the outset, let me tell you that I am of the very firm opinion that opportunities do exist and for India. And India in the current environment is very much like the rise of the phoenix. That's what I thought was the real way to put it for post-COVID scenario. To rise like a phoenix actually means to rise from the ashes, to emerge from a catastrophe, like let's say the COVID pandemic right now, stronger, smarter, and more powerful. An example is like someone who has lost his successful business and he has to start once again. And that has happened. Most of the earlier stories, success stories of all the inventors are that they have lost everything and they started again. So be the phoenix. Phoenix, as you know, is the in Greek philosophy is a bird which dies and then regenerates itself. So it actually is an example saying that it's showing renewal, hope, and a new life being sculpted. I think this is what COVID at this point in time will allow us to do. Let's see what's happening in the global scenario. One thing is certain, and that is the world has changed forever. And there's a complete pure distinction pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's completely different. And therefore, and I believe, and all experts believe, that it will never go back to its pre-COVID situation. In 2008 financial crisis, many of you will be aware that the collapse of the financial system. At that time also, whatever was the good trends at that point in time, pre-financial crisis, post of that, it never went back ever to its earlier trends. And therefore, this is a hard truth at this point in time. We have to live with that we will not go back to the pre-COVID situation. The pre-COVID, the world economy was supposed to grow by about 2.5%. An estimate about a month back when this pandemic really came and broke everyone's neck, it changed to a 1% degrowth, which is a best case scenario, which means that there is a 3.5% drop. Therefore, and the latest reports actually say that the world GDP is likely to be seeing a fall of about 3.9%. And therefore, you really are not, you're in a situation where it's not going to be so easy to get out of. Obviously, because you have more than 100 countries which have closed their borders, with there's no trade, no people, no goods movement, nothing at all. The world trade has fallen, depending on the country to country, from between 13 to 32%. Now, that is the kind of a fall in trade that has happened. It's far worse than the 2008 financial crisis levels. Observe that, the trends in 2008 actually didn't go back, but at least it was a growth. For example, China was contributing about 4% of the GDP of the country at that point. Now it is 16% of global GDP. So China was the one who created the SARS also at that point in time, if you recollect, 2002. At that point in time, it was 4% of GDP, their whatever contribution was. Thereafter, till this COVID, it came to 16%. So there are that opportunities, but you cannot go back. The entire trade or entire system doesn't go back. It will never go back to its pre-COVID levels. It may recover. So what I meant was that it will recover, but it will not go back to the pre-COVID, just as the pre-2008 finance did not happen. But of course, there are incentives, there are stimulus packages which are coming, and therefore it's likely that it will grow. It will grow faster, whether it will be a V-shaped growth, whether it will be a U-shaped growth, we really don't know at this point in time. But there are hopes of recovery post-September, maybe around October or so. With the quantitative easing that happened in post-2008 and with the stimulus packages of trillions of dollars, I'm certain that this growth is likely to come back. There are US and China, they are friends, enemies, whatever you say. But in terms of exports and imports, US is the biggest importer of the world, and China is the biggest exporter of the world. And the second rank, exactly they share again. US is the second largest exporter in the world, and China is the second largest importer in the world. Now, and therefore, the love-hate relationship definitely is not going to be changing much. India in that whole thing stands at, in terms of the exports, the 18th position in the world, with about 324 to 350 billion dollars, and 10th in terms of imports with 484 to 500. Because that imports, the bill might change because of the oil price coming down drastically, and therefore that import value could change. But in services, India ranks the 5th in exports, and that's about $214 billion of exports. These rankings, as we go by, I'll tell you how it can change. It will change in the years to come in favor of India, is what I believe in. The scenario post-globalization, in my opinion, I've been doing various readings and all, is going to be that of a populism, protectionism, and climatic change. Now, what I mean by this, I'll just explain. Even before COVID, you see that there were shifts in globalization. That means globalization is what? It's a complete global trade. That means Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family and one marketplace. That's globalization. But that's not been really happening. There have been many whispers there before, even before COVID. For example, the US and China trade war. That's been going on for the last 1 year. Trump has been blowing hot, blowing cold, whatever it is. Not only that, even the European Union, there were a lot of protests in the European Union saying that, free trade is really not helping the country themselves. Now, Trump has been doing that for the last many years now. This COVID can spell the death knell for such globalization, because it has actually told the world what irresponsible and unreasonable reliance we have on Chinese supplies. And that is actually a very vulnerable position. And we are all, now I'm not talking about India, and I'll come to Indian numbers also a little later, but US and everyone for that matter are heavily dependent on China for that matter. And therefore, with this, the kind of changes that would happen, I'll mention that. It's not going to be that easy for China to continue to play this kind of role in the world market. Therefore, there are likely to be three scenarios. One, localized. That means you protect the protectionism to emerge. Manufacture and manufacturing setups would have to be closer to home. That's localized. It was observed in 2008 also that the global value chain, that is GVC, it fell, and it led to an increase in the domestic production in the world. I'm talking about wherever buckets by 1.5%. So the dependency on imports and all that actually had come down at that point in time also. This is likely to repeat. Banned hydroxychloroquine tablets. They said no, we need it for ourselves. So that's protectionism. That's localization. The second alternative to that is probably they could be regionalization, and that is manufacturers can go not from the local, but at least to the regions around them. Now, we have seen that also even pre-COVID, and that is US has actually been doing a local regionalization by shifting some of this manufacturing into Mexico. European Union has also done that, and they have shifted their manufacturing to closer home, that is Eastern Europe and Turkey. So this kind of a regionalization probably would happen, and this concentration could increase. The third possibility, of course, is continue the same way as earlier, and that is globalization. However, you may think, okay, there could be a very good growth. You will have a V-shaped growth immediately, like the SARS has said. After SARS in 2003, or even after the Hong Kong flu of 1968, the growth was actually V-shaped. It wasn't U or L-shaped. L-shape is flattish curve, but it was actually V-shaped. It's possible that the globalization could continue and V-shaped growth can start happening. However, there's going to be one big difference. Definitely, there's going to be a US-China decoupling, and therefore the manufacturing basis may shift to, it's already been done to a large extent, to quite an extent, to other Asian countries like Indonesia and Vietnam, and even India. So there'll be a reshuffling of the entire global supply chain, and that's where I think India will come in as a big player. We are, as doing everything in order to become a larger player in the world market. Now, immediately, if you see, there are three scenarios which emerge as far as the Indian growth story is concerned. I'm talking about the immediate one, let us say, the short term. If both India and the world get COVID under control, let's say by May end or June. Now, people are attempting, frankly, even the US is attempting to go back to normalcy and all that, irrespective of the death. If that happens, with both world and India control COVID by, let's say, May end or June, then India GDP of 2021 could be seeing a 5.3% growth. Now, that's very good if you really go back. And then let's not get into the debate whether it's the real GDP and it's fudged amount. I'm not talking about that. Numbers as they stand. If India controls COVID, which hopefully and wish is that it will definitely control COVID, but the world fails to do so, then India could grow at about 4 to 4.5%. I mean, or lower. But if the world and India both fail to control COVID quickly, the growth rate could be less than 3%. I'm talking about the Indian growth rate. Now, of course, rating agencies have also said that it's going to be zero growth and only 1% growth and things like that. But I think the way we are placed at this point in time, the worst situation could be that at least the 3% growth is likely to happen, the recovery starting September 2020. In conclusion, that in the whole thing, in the global scenario is that there is a new normal which is emerging, and that new normal is where there would be a shift to, as I said, localization or regionalization. Cash is the king. If you're sitting on money, you are the king. There will be a supply chain resilience that will immediate. That means reshuffling and ensuring that difficulties in that are overcome. There will be definitely a tremendous digital push. Agility would be the key. Quick decisions would be a key. Agility would be the key. And we all will have to move towards a variable cost model, reducing the fixed cost as much as possible. So that's what is likely to happen. The short-term issues. Now coming to what is the short-term issues which can be there in India at this point in time, at COVID and post-COVID also. Indian demand is definitely likely to fall because of fall in consumer spending and the composition of the total spend. For example, if you are spending 100 rupees, more or less, this is the statistics we show, that about 26.3% is spent on food. And that food expenditure is not likely to change because for living. So that's fine. But about 26.5% is spent on transport, communication, recreation, education, restaurants, and all that. That is going to drastically change. And therefore, that 26.5% drop is what is likely to lead to a drop in the entire consumer spending and therefore the lack in demand. Urban activity could come to can be stalled because there's an uncertainty of the workers coming back. There is an uncertainty about how much of these worker category can really be sustained. The informal worker category actually contribute about 37% of the total salary bill. And these workers are not really going to come back soon. And therefore, that is definitely going to lower the consumption again. The production will not start fast enough. India, imports about $70 billion worth of imports. 13.7% is that from China. That is like imports of electric machinery, equipment, organic chemical, plastic, fertilizer, and a host of other activities, almost 20, 25 of them. This imports from China, which I said 13.7% is impacted. And hence industries which are related to that could also be impacted. Indians and Indian corporates at this point in time and also going forward are likely to face a cash flow problem. Where's the money? You keep paying your wages. Where's the money? Of course, there's always a saying that you can borrow, but the debt servicing could be an issue, and therefore borrowing is not going to be very easy. But surely all this will lead to lower demand and therefore lower growth. And if you talk about very quickly about the industries, almost all industries are going to be impacted. Some medium, some severe, and some lesser. For example, let's say starting with textiles and apparel. The production is already lower by 10 to 12%. It is likely to fall further. Who's going to buy a shirt tomorrow or a fancy shirt? No, none. Auto, both commercial as well as the passenger vehicle demand is likely to fall. But in the auto sector, because it's the biggest employment generating sector, definitely, in my opinion, concessions are likely to be given, and it should be coming back much faster. This happened post 2018 also. Aviation and tourism, and therefore that's something which is really a big concern. There's a potential job loss of almost 38 million. Building and construction, no new schemes are going to be launched. I don't think much demand is there. There could be a muted demand, but I think the people who have the inventory, they may hold on to it. We don't know. Prices are likely to get corrected by 20%. Retail consumerism, that is, only essential items are going to be used or could be purchased, and that will go up, but non-essential items are going to see a big drop. Banking, the next one. Banking, you have a lot of liquidity. RBI has given a lot of money in the system. However, the credit quality is really low at this point in time, and the credit offtake is also very low. And therefore, you might see not a good growth, and actually the banks not performing very well. We all are aware of the NBFC's woes, which are yet to be addressed. So there's some relaxation. Just now, there's a 50,000 crore given for the mutual funds because they are passing through a big liquidity crunch. But NBFCs are yet to be handled. Insurance, I think insurance will be a low impact, except for certain asset creation where the premiums would go, but insurance sector is likely to be much lesser impacted. Food and agriculture, there's a low impact in the medium term. Metal and mining, because of the infrastructure boost, you could see only a lower impact on this. The next one is the MSME. Now, that's a big major cause of concern, frankly. There are about 75 MSMEs in India, and then there is an estimate that 25% of that could shut shop. Now, I'll give you some statistics. Now, MSMEs contribute, they generate jobs and they give jobs to about 114 million people, and they contribute about 30 to 35% of the GDP. They could be, acquisitions and more established players could take over, but MSMEs, I think, are going to be maximum attached. And I think everyone is looking for the next some stimulus package for these MSMEs. Hopefully, it will come in. Oil and gas, the aviation fuel impact is there, supply chain disruptions there, and therefore it will lead to a medium-term impact. The next is pharma. Pharma is the only industry wherein, at this point in time, the government has given stimulus directly, 10,000 crores is what they've told. This, in the medium to long term, will be a positive, not just this 10,000 crores, but the pharma industry as such, it will be a positive because there will be alternate medicines which will be required. But apart from that, pharma has actually in the last 3-4 years been suffering a lot, and therefore I think it's the cycle which will turn positive, and this only has acted as an growth. Power, there's low impact. Telecom, the mobile handset production has really suffered. It's going to really go down drastically. But still, I think as a telecom and as a communication, it has a medium impact. The last, transport and logistics. The pace of infrastructure development is slow and demand is slow, and therefore the volumes are slower. And therefore, I think in terms of transportation logistics, there will be an impact. Is it all gloom? Not necessarily. There are some sectors. Now, all of us may not be in that, but it's likely that we can look for that. Which industries, which sectors you think you can probably see a growth or a good positive development, if not growth? One is the digital products, the information products. Now, the physical products require all the transportation, taxes, various things, but the information products which help in grow, the structured knowledge products which are there online, that is likely to grow. There's something called the gig economy, GIG economy, which means that you are employed for a short term only as far as the project is concerned. Now, such kind of project, that means you're not on the payroll, you are there, you're available, and you can be employed for that particular project. You are paid for the project you have done. These kind of small projects, small gig economies, this is likely to emerge, and that will probably replace a lot of jobs which are being lost. One good point is this will allow entrepreneurship development. Like it will be forced entrepreneurship. Like a lot of us don't have jobs. What do? We are forced to look at, and especially of course we Gujaratis, we have an uncanny knack of finding these business opportunities in any and every place. And I really salute the entrepreneurial spirit. That is likely to increase. Things like home gardening, the hydroponics, the agriculture, those are going to increase. That's going to develop. Online coaching and education systems and classes is likely to increase. Mental health related, and that's unfortunate, but mental health related is going to see a growth. Let's say doctors, if there are any in this panel, psychiatrists, and the like, that's going to really grow. Alternate energies, because of the pollution and other alternate energies like renewable energies, that's likely to grow. Alternate medicine is likely to grow. Like enough of this pathology. You need to vote for homeopathy and Ayurvedic and things. That's likely to grow. Gaming industry. Now, what have we been doing for the last 30-40 years? A lot of us have been playing games in various places. So gaming industry and innovations will come in there. The last, data sciences like IoT, Internet of Things, that is, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all this will definitely grow. One aspect which is so close to all of us, and that is the stock market scenario. Though I'm not an expert in the stock market, and I really don't know who can claim to be an expert at the stock market. Because whatever anybody has predicted, I think it's always really been, either wrong or it has been way away from the mark. And at this point in time, I don't think even Bejan Daruwala can really give a proper prediction on the stock market. But however, let me give you certain statistics and certain things. And I think stock market will grow. That's one industry or one place it will grow. If you see the if you see the profit to GDP ratio, both in India and the US had about 7% to 4-5 years back. Profits in India doubled. That means if it was 10, it became 20. And in US, it grew only by 1.5 times. However, in the current year, the profit to GDP ratio has in India has fallen to 3.5, whereas in the US it's gone to 10, which actually means that the profit margins in India have dropped. This is definitely a matter of concern because you would have heard the धंधो तो था जब पैसा क्या है profit क्या है नफो क्या है this kind of a thing which normally has been there has been happening for a long time. It's a matter of concern, but I think this is still, in spite of all this, the scenario is good. There are value stocks which are available, and those who are sitting on cash can actually make good value buying. If you see, it's not the first time that we have seen such kind of a 35% drop and all that. Some of you who have been in the market for a longer period of time, 1992 was Harshad Mehta scam, when the Sensex fell from 4,600 to 1,900. Y2K problem which came up, year 2000, K problem which came, at that time the Sensex fell from 6,400 to 2,900. The financial crisis time, the Sensex fell from 21,000 to 8,000. And today we are seeing the same thing. But after all these lows, it is bounced back to going to as high as 42,000, right? Now it might have corrected, but then you can see definitely that it is likely to increase. This is actually the rise of the phoenix, if I can say. There have been various stimulus packages which have been announced in the world and also in India. Earlier to this, the whole stock market has fallen because $15 billion had been taken out. The FIs are taken out of the stock market and came down crashing 35. From the trillions of dollars, even if 50 billion or 15 million can come back to India, which is definitely likely to come because their growth story lies in India, then the stock market is definitely likely to go back to those levels. Now, when that kind of prediction, have you seen the button? No, I'm not an expert. I'll refrain from talking about it. But surely it is not a time to shift your asset class. Don't go away from equity at this point in time. You may do a little bit of balancing to buy a few bonds. You may do, the G-Sec purchases, or you may invest in the US market. That's likely to go up. But don't think that equity has fallen. Don't shift away from that. You're likely to lose. So better stay invested or increase it in lot, and you'll definitely do much better. Now, the last one of them, India's growth and what are the opportunities. Now, every time there's always been a question asked, can India overtake China? And can it be the next superpower? There's something which I'm sure all of you would have discussed many times between you or with various people. And most of them will say that, the straight answer, nahi tha. Maybe yes, okay, there's no dispute in that generally, but I think I should need to give you certain statistics in that to really know whether we are close to that or we are way away from that. Now, frankly, if you really compare, it's like Goliath and the David. US has got a GDP of 21 trillion. China is about 13.5. I'm talking about a year back. Nothing should change, but China has a GDP of $13.5 trillion, and India is about 2.6 to 3 trillion, and wanting to go to 5 trillion. What Modi Sahib has been telling. If you go by the normal expected growth, we would, and China's expected slow growth, you would be taking about 33 to 35 years to overtake them. Can we do it faster? I think what we need to really look at is forget about the competition. Let's go from that. There's a debate. What is the debate? India can grow better and faster than China, and there are various indications towards this. One of the first, and all of us are aware of that again, is that 67% of the population of India, working population, is under 35 years, the youngest ever. And the world is actually, is aging, including China for that matter, and all the Asian countries. And India is the youngest in that. On top of that, we have only 2.4% of the world's land area and 17% of the population, world population. And of the 17% world population, the working class 67% is younger than 35. And even if 20 years later, when we become probably 1.7 billion population, this young working class is not going to, that demography is not going to change a lot. And therefore, we are definitely there for a long term to stay in this market and grow. We are a great consumption country ourselves. And therefore, the growth will happen for our own consumption, for our own sake, not necessarily the exports and all, for our own sake. And in terms of the services, I don't think at any point in time India can be beaten up so easily. The services export and the growth in that is likely to continue. So I think we have a great story therein. As I said earlier, the decoupling of China and US is definitely going to happen. See, the confidence in China, especially now, enough of enough. Sometimes SARS, then the swine flu, then there is, various testing, and all the fights have been going on. Enough of that. Confidence in China, especially with the political disposition, not being a democracy, as you know, has taken a beating. And this time it has taken a big beating. This is our chance. So you've been seeing, irrespective of whatever may be the opposition saying, we have been warming up to the US. And I think that kind of a decoupling between the US and China is an opportunity for us. And, keeping aside all criticism, I'm a completely apolitical man, but I think we don't have at this point in time a better leader than Narendra Modi for a long time to come. And therefore, with his policies, if our economy can really open up more, which I'm sure it will, deregulate, have a clarity of our thought, and then give it a big push, we can grow. What happens is, normally we are called an argumentative Indians. We argue, everyone has a point, and everybody wants to say something. If you can have the world agenda, and if the political disposition does have the world agenda, I'm sure we will be making a big dent in the market. Look what we have already achieved. The poverty line, 271 million people have gone above the poverty line, 12.7% decline in the poverty rate. Urbanization is increasing, leading to aspirational growth and job growth. Three things are required in order to really make this even bigger growth, and as I said, give a run for the money for China and the others. We have a big informal sector, and that is like rickshawala, street vendors, household help, various people who contribute about 50% of the GDP, but are all cash-based. So if this sector can be formalized, let me take from informal sector to formal, the wages would increase, the tax collections would increase, the aspirational growth would be giving a good push. So that's first shift we need to do. The second shift is from farm to factory. Industrialization has been there, but Nehru has given us a socialistic pattern of society which has put us behind. My comments on that, and we need not be. We can be disparate if there are any Nehru lovers here, but my comments is that has not worked. Socialist pattern of society has not worked. I think we need to go from farm. Farm, of course, is needed. Agriculture is definitely needed, but farm to factory, the proportion of the non-agricultural workers has to increase. And third, very important, is a shift from rural to urbanization. It's already been going, but that is going to spur a growth. If all these three things do happen, I think in conclusion, I can say India has a great chance. We can rise like the phoenix. This pandemic gives rise to unforeseen things which you will have to handle. Entrepreneurship and new innovation is likely to come. And for us, Gujaratis, these kind of situations and businesses, businessmen is the best opportunity. Let's make the best use of it. I think, therefore, in conclusion, we have a great chance post-COVID or at this point in time. I wish everybody the best. I wish India the best. I have finished. this is what I'll have to say. I open it for questions. Divyang, I hope
Yeah.
I have lived up to your time expectations. I don't know, it was 45 minutes, and I think I saved about 5 minutes in that. So,
Yeah.
like a finance guy who always looking at savings, I've done a bit of savings for you too in the time. Please go ahead, open for questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and we got some questions in the chat box, and also I received some questions in personal, in a personal message. But most of them you answered in last 10-15 minutes, wherein what we should do as an entrepreneur post
Yeah.
this COVID, and specifically what India should do. So, in which you very rightly said that we are neglecting this point that 50% of the GDP is in informal sector. Let's see
Yeah.
how we can shift it to a formal sector. Now, quickly, just three basic questions. Then I will hand it over to Divyang Bhai to take it forward. First question, which I have received from three or four, participants, is that in the current scenario, as a businessman, what primarily should I do? Whether I should reduce the cost, whether I should cut the salaries, or whether I should increase my marketing expenditure. There is a dilemma between this is also an opportunity, and this is also a time to be a cautious. We need to be cautious. Also, we need to be seizing the opportunity. Wherein, if I do marketing, if I do branding, if I do something extraordinary which I don't do usually in my business, there can be a huge opportunity which might lie ahead of me. Or I should cut the cost. I should be a bit skeptical, a bit pessimistic, and just wait for the time to get things back to normal. But then the question is, when the things are back to normal, the time would have been gone to do it. Same like stock market, once you wait for the correction, the prices are again up by 20-30%. So you don't know whether you missed it on or you were correct. So same like this, as an entrepreneur, what I should do.
Okay, let me answer that. Let me take your stock market kind. As I said, if you believe that the stock is good, it's a long-term bet in that. You can always keep accumulating it at every fall, as we all know. And therefore, there's never the bottom, and there's never a peak for this if the intrinsic value of that stock and if the performance of the stock is good. Taking the same kind of an analogy into your businesses also, if you believe in the product and if you believe that there's a long-term story and if there is a definite success in that, I don't think there should be a move towards drastically cutting down on your various costs. Having said that, a word of caution. The current times surely looks to reduce your fixed cost, go towards the variable cost model as much as possible, including the gig economies, which I was trying to tell you, outsourcing and things like that. There is a definite need to cut the cost. Don't go and overspend in the branding at this point in time, till at least if you see good traction in the next 3 to 4 months. You will know and you will be able to see that yes, there is a coming back of this growth story. And 3 to 4 months is not too long a period. So while you keep your fixed costs under control, go to the variable cost model, you can spend on something which you believe is for a long-term story, but cautiously, at least for the next 3 to 4 months.
Oh, super. Well said. Yeah. So that clears my first question. The another, I personally have one question, that we have, couple of startups who are attending today's webinar, and also myself personally always have this curiosity that what happens in the boardrooms of Adani, Reliance, Birla, Tata. So you have been part of this various boardroom sessions. So in time like this, in this difficulty wherein the future is a bit uncertain, as a startup, as an MSME, what decision are taken by this big corporates which help them achieve what they are today, and what we should, so just couple of things which happens in the boardrooms of these companies, which we should also just ponder over, or do some, which we should also ponder or do a brainstorming little bit of it, similar to that kind.
Okay. Now, one big word of caution before I can say what happens in that. Entrepreneurs, large ones, they have a huge resilience which is there. They have reserves and they have those risk-taking abilities which are, it's really very different. And for any employee or even a smaller like MSMEs, it's not going to be possible to go and take similar kind of risk. And therefore, irrespective of what may be happening in the world, in the boardrooms, I want to caution that you cannot follow the exact footsteps. But I'll tell you what can really happen. This is the time when opportunities come in plenty. You will be able to buy a lot of companies, even in an MSME. If you think there is a smaller another company, and you can acquire them, you can take stake, you can increase your something called what we call as an affiliated marketing. You can pool the marketing. You can always market the products. You can get into some joint venture. You can get into any kind of arrangements with them. These things happen, and what happens in the boardroom is what you can do tomorrow if you believe that this is something which is good for you in the long run, and today is the time. Take this decision, act on it immediately. Don't wait, don't overanalyze, don't start such kind of a number crunching. And I know what I'm saying, it's against me. Don't always listen to your finance guys. Understand? I mean, we finance people over a period of time have become businessmen ourselves, and
Yeah.
therefore we have to understand. We take the risk-taking abilities now, but
Yeah.
always, don't always listen to your accountant. Let's put it
True.
that way. So you should act. The only thing which you need is the opportunity which is there tomorrow will not be there day after, especially when there are enough people looking at good assets, and therefore if you believe that asset, just go ahead and do it. That kind of a quick decision is what leads differentiates this big men from all of us.
Yeah, superb, sir. Very well said. Yeah, and last big question from my side, that as we are seeing so many views coming up in by various experts, what do you think for next 1 year to 2 year? Whether there is undoubtedly there is going to be recession for a period of time because everything has come to a halt. But will that recession be further extended as into depression, or we will have a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery, or we will have to wait a bit longer for everything? As a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as an you. So, what's your personal view on that?
Well, as I said, it's extremely difficult to really predict, especially in this kind of a situation. But I think at least for the coming a couple of months and all, there'll be an L shape. That means it has fallen, it will stay flat. It will not go further down. That kind of a thing. I'm not talking about stock market, please mind you. I'm just talking about there could be an L shape. However, both you and even we is likely to V-shape recoveries are likely to happen. When it's a recession, it's a combination of various things. A recession is a 6 month period downfall called a recession. In my opinion, no. It's a prolonged downfall which is called a recession. I don't think there's going to be a big 1 or 2 years recession period. There will be a fall for sure. I think 2021 is almost, in terms of various profitability increases, growth, and those are almost written off. Let me put it that way. There'd be a very nominal growth or that, but beyond 2021, that is March 21 onwards, I don't think it's going to be as flat as this. There will be definitely recovery. Now you may put that as a U-shaped recovery, or you can put it as a V-shape. It's for an interpretation, but there's definitely going to be a recovery.
Yeah. So that's yeah. So this is a big question currently. Everyone is just having this kind of confusion with what we should do. So before I hand it over to Divyang bhai, all of us, as an entrepreneur, investors. So a question, CNBC type of question: mutual fund versus direct equity versus gold versus FD versus real estate. What if I have 5 lakh rupees or say 10 lakh rupees as of now? It should be mutual fund versus direct equity versus gold versus FD versus real estate. What should I do today?
Real estate is going to be, I think it's going to take some time to really come up to the levels, and therefore real estate, and that too, it requires a lot of money and good staying power. I don't think real estate, it's an immediate investment. And I'm giving you a disclaimer here, please. I'm not an expert in that. Therefore, please read the offer documents carefully and invest. It's what I call, like that. But I think real estate is not going to be very easy going forward. Gold, yes, there's an opportunity. Now, both pluses and minuses are there. See, with the biggest consumer of gold is China in India.
Yeah.
And who's going to be investing it into jewelry in this point in time? But there are schools of thought, saying that rather than go direct gold for that, maybe you can go for the gold bonds which the government is giving. It is giving you a good protection, 2.5% of return, as well as appreciation in the gold. I think that would be a better way to hold gold rather than direct. The direct equity and mutual fund has always been the most debated one. Now, you cannot do away with either of them. And I think, therefore, there has to be a balanced allocation. Continue your SIPs, however much suffering you may be having at this point in time, which is all going through the mutual funds, as you know. So mutual funds is that indirect route through the SIP and through certain and one-off investments also. But direct equity, I don't think there is any need for you to reduce that exposure. You may actually increase that exposure a little more. So that could be the allocation between four of them. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So it was actually enriching session as far as so many new aspects and point of views we got to know, and this is what the learning is all about. And I will hand it over to Divyang bhai for taking it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you very much for those wonderful things and hosting it so very well. And thank you, participants, for throwing the questions. It is now time to conclude this, but before we leave, I would like to thank Ravi for his wonderfully crafted speech. The core values that he has given, 15 core values. It has a touch of divinity. It has a touch of spirituality. And as I know him very well, without that, none of his speeches or lectures can be, concluded. But I am so very thankful to Ravi for being here, giving me this opportunity to, first welcome him and then now thank him. Of course, between us, this is becoming very formal. But I, being a president of this chapter, it is my duty to, it is my humble duty to thank you for coming over and, just a phone call, friends, to Ravi, and he was ready. And after that, I never had any communication with him about what he is going to talk and all, because I know his capacities. I know him for last 34 years. He's been fantastic in his subject, and apart from that, he has crafted himself so very well in his personal core values. Whatever all 15 core values that he has explained today, I have seen him implementing each and every one of them, and I have grown with him like that. So thank you, Ravi.
Thank you.
At this point of time, when you have elaborated so much about the economy, about the maybe some slump situation, post lockdown, post COVID, and then maybe there will be some light at the end of the tunnel that we are expecting. The best thing that we can do is to make a small pair with you in terms of Sanskrit is Sthita Pragnasya ka bhasa samadhi tasya keshava Sthita di kim pravaseta kima sita vrajeta kim. So it is very important to maintain your mental balance, be it your business, be it your personal life, be it your professional life. Things are going to come, it is going to fall, but then God has given you inner strength to have it on you and then find out a way. We are looking, as you rightly said, we are demographically, we have a young entrepreneurs. Only 2 young chaps of Ambani family have closed a deal of 48,000 crore worth of investment in a record time. And that is the actual youth and the demography that we have in India, and we are looking very positively at them. We have second generation right now, they are into in the business. So they have a huge opportunity actually to rise like a phoenix, as you rightly said. So thank you very much, Ravi. And I'm also at this point of time, I'm thankful to my webinar team comprised of Arjun Akrowala, Ketan Bhai, Manan, Darpan Patel, Jagat Bhai. I'm thankful from bottom of my heart for the hard work that you have done. I'm also thankful to Vyapar Jagat for joining us as a media partner. This is being live telecast right now on their Facebook page, and so many people are watching that. I am getting some responses from so many viewers there also. So I'm thankful to Vyapar Jagat for being there with us, and they are going to be there with us for our future webinar series also. And very special thank to Darpan Patel of our own chapter concept marketing for designing this wonderful flyer, digital circulation, and whatever best he could do in a very short time, very short notice. So thanks, Darpan Bhai. And last but not the least, all those who could join today at 11:30, some of them are, busy working from home. Some of them have household chores to do with their, wives, but still they all could join. And this was a wonderful opportunity. And I think it gives me a lot of satisfaction to convey. I'm not at all hesitant in saying that our first attempt has gone extraordinary just because of Ravi's well-crafted speech. And we are very thankful to you. And most importantly, I am thankful to all the participants. With this note, and once again, thanking everybody who could join today. I'm thankful to my online meeting host, Akash and Nidhi, for conducting this so very well without any technical hitch. So with their energy and enthusiasm, we have been doing very well on Zoom platform. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining. And now I think we can end the meeting and we can leave also. Thank you everybody once again.
Thank you.
Ravi.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.